I'm Alex Joseph. I'm the managing editor of Hue Magazine at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Welcome to another installment of FIT Talks, the oral history program of FIT. Today is February 20, 2019. It's a little after 1 p.m. and I am interviewing Susan Rietman of the college's Textile Surface Design program.
And fabric styling.
And fabric styling. Great. And Susan has been at the college for 54 years, correct?
Yes.
All right. Susan, thanks for chatting with me. So for a bit of context, if you will, can you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
I had a very privileged childhood. I was very fortunate, very lucky, and grew up outside of Boston and went to private school, to an all-girls school, and then on to an all-women's college. And yeah, it was a very old-fashioned kind of Boston upbringing, very conservative, and I still wear my pearls. And yeah, we went to the Cape in the summer, and we had a beautiful house, a cottage on the beach, and I'm one of the ones who, kind of interesting in today's language, I came out. I was a debutante, which is a very different meaning than that phrase today, which is interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that switch, always so interesting, right? So as a child, do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I really wanted to be Pocahontas.
Oh.
I wanted to live in a teepee. I loved turquoise, and I wanted braids. And that was my dream. I did a lot of ice skating. I did figure skating. I played a lot of tennis, all competition. We're a very sports-minded family. I had two brothers, an older and a younger brother, and I used to love to go to the Museum of Fine Arts, and my favorite painting was John Singer Sargent's The Daughters, and I would pretend they were my sisters. And it's such a beautiful painting of those four girls.
What's going on in this painting? No, I don't remember.
There are four daughters of James Boyd, and it was painted in the 1800s, and it's very dark and murky. And the youngest one, who's quite young, she's sitting kind of in the front, and they're all wearing white pinafores. And it was just my favorite place to be as a young child.
In the museum?
In the museum, yep. And the other side of my wanting to be Pocahontas. I wanted to be in that painting and have sisters.
Yeah. But you didn't have sisters?
No, two brothers.
Two brothers. Did you have a sense of, when you began to go into high school, did you have a sense of a profession that you wanted to go into? Or?
No, I just loved to draw. I loved to paint. And I was good at it innately. My mother was a painter. She graduated from the Massachusetts College of Art, so it was sort of handed down, I think. And I had no idea. None. And when I went to college, I did art history, and I did English, and I did studio arts. And I took a serigraphy course, and that led me into the field of textiles.
Serigraphy?
Serigraphy
what is that?
Serigraphy is like, it's a screen print,
okay,
but it's a piece of fine art because it's within a contained area and usually framed. Whereas a textile has a repeat and goes on, unless it's a border or a spot printing. But that was my first, I love the process of screen printing. And somewhere that, but I never thought I would be doing it.
And then, just to back to one second, your mother was a painter, but there were no textiles or anything in the family at all. It was just like your father didn't do anything with textiles?
No, he had his own advertising agency. My mother had the most beautiful clothes in the world, and I still have them, and will one day do something with them. All designer pieces. I mean, it was amazing. Beautiful.
Do you remember any specific items that were?
Well, she had a whole collection of Hattie Carnegie hats, for instance, okay. And then she has some Givenchy, and it's just beautiful and beaded, and that was the era in the 50s where it was very dressy. Or at least they led a very dressy life.
You would do something with them in the future? You would make a piece of art, or?
No, I plan to donate them, or...
Oh.
Yeah.
Understandable. And you got a bachelor's at
Yes.
Skidmore.
Yes.
So did you?
And then I wanted to move to New York. I fell in love with New York as a 10-year-old when I first came here with my parents, because it was alive. Where we grew up, there was not another house in sight. And it was beautiful, but it was really dark at night. And New York, the cabs and the noise, and I loved it. I loved the garbage trucks. I loved everything. And I told them I'm going to move here, and I did right after college.
Wow.
Got 3 roommates, and we came down. We rented an apartment, and then had to find a job.
Were you in Manhattan?
Yes, Upper East Side.
Upper
I've been
East
in the same 2 blocks ever since I moved here in 1961.
How about that?
How about that?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, what was that first job?
My first job was with Leslie Tillett. And Leslie had 2 businesses. One was downtown on 37th Street, where he designed bathing suits and swimwear and wraps and occasionally other things. And then uptown, just a block away from where I lived, he and his wife, it was called D.D. and Leslie Tillett, and they did what we called then custom. It's now called bespoke. Fabric for people. And I got a job with him, and I was lucky. And it just worked.
You said bespoke fabric.
Like custom.
Okay. So they would weave it themselves?
No, it's all printing.
All printing.
I don't do any weaving at all.
Okay.
I knit, but I don't weave. Somebody would come in with a little porcelain objet and say, I would like that for draperies. So I'd say, okay. And we'd do it. And upstairs was hand printed. Lived in a townhouse. The 2nd floor was this amazing, the length of the townhouse was a print table. And this wonderful large, I think he was Peruvian man, Andre, and he would print. And it was magical. To me, it was magical.
Describe your work. Tell me what you were doing in that.
Well, up there, I would be designing with Leslie and his wife, Doris. And then we would go, and then I would come downtown to 37th Street and design for the swimwear industry. Most of it in those days was in the West Coast, and they'd come east. And then I just learned everything. We would go down to the village. There's a place called Rose Screen Studio, and she would make all the screens by hand and print them in Hoboken, New Jersey, where they had their own plant. And I'd go out there and look at the color and be sure the registration was right, and the printing business. So it was 2 very different worlds that he was running.
Bespoke fabric and also swimwear. In the swimwear
and bedding as well, and we did all kinds of things, but it was basically bedding. Basically swimwear. But then we'd branch out. We'd do bedding. For instance, in 1964, he and I did all the fabrics for the 3 American pavilions of the World's Fair.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. Yeah, you'd get all these things. And then I did some freelance for Jack Leonard Larson, and I kind of roamed around, and yeah.
What was it like working with Jack? Now, I've interviewed him. He's a fascinating character. Do you remember what kind of projects you worked on with him? A real innovator in the industry, right?
Prints. I just did print. I didn't do any weaving, and so
Okay.
he'd have some kind of a woven and he'd want a print coordinate to go with it, and and Leslie would send me over and say, Susan can do this, and because they were good friends, and yeah. So it was fascinating, because you never knew quite what was going to happen that day. Something new would happen, and yeah.
Like a different
project or something new over the transom, and he'd take it and he'd say, you can do this, and I go, okay. Not sure I could, but I did, and yeah.
So how long were you at this position,
That's why we have a resume. Right? I don't know. I can't remember. Probably till 66.
Okay.
Is my guess. Yeah. It's in there somewhere.
All right. But in other words,
And I stayed in touch, even after I wasn't working there full time. I stayed in touch with him, and he would call me, and he'd be writing a book on the Aztecs, and would I illustrate it? Sure. So I did that. did. For a while, he and I had a shoe company together, and it was called Shoe Foo, which in French is Shoe Madness, and it was Shoe Madness.
Oh.
And yeah, it was fun.
In other words, you sort of immediately were doing the exact job that you wanted to do. Did you ever have any like, gee, I don't know if I want to work in textiles for the rest of my life?
But it wasn't just the one thing. It wasn't,
Right.
see, it was so diverse because of him. And that's why you were doing something on Tuesday, and by Friday you'd be doing something totally different.
Oh.
So I loved that. And that's what I like about this whole industry, because you can do so many things. It's so vast. Because it's not just textiles, it's surface, which leads to porcelain and glassware and paper products, which was, when I was later on my big project. Yeah.
You, what was to back up for a second, the shoes? What were you doing for just stenciling or like?
Well, met these people from DuPont, and they showed us this stuff, synthetic stuff that was called Corfam. And I said, ooh, that's really not very attractive. So they said, what can you do to it? I said, I don't know, send me a carton and I'll see what I can do. And so they did. And then they called and they said, we're coming into New York. Do you have anything? And I said, yes. Of course I hadn't, but that's what we all do. At midnight you start. Went into my kitchen and I took a potato masher and heated it up, and I embossed, and I pizza cutter, and I cut, and I painted, and I used metallic, and I cut strips, and I wove it, and I hand painted, and I put together a portfolio in one night. And then that led to the crazy shoe company, and I found myself up in Massachusetts learning about uppers and unders of shoes. I didn't know anything about shoe wear. And Princess Petunia Tele was our celeb, and we had the window in I. Magnin, long gone, with my hand-painted shoes that were, what were they called? Kitten shoes, I think, like Audrey Hepburn wore, that little tiny heel.
Cool.
Yeah.
I. Magnin was a famous shoe company.
Yes.
Shoe store.
On Fifth Avenue.
On Fifth Avenue,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Cool. So you were working there, it sounds like, for about 5 or 6 years. And then did you switch to doing freelance? Did you?
I was doing freelance at the same time.
All the time.
And I was just busy. When you're in your 20s, you can do a lot. A lot of energy,
So then what happened to your career? You had worked for a number of years. You said you left the company in 1966.
Well, I'm not even sure if it was, but in 1965, Leslie said to me, Leslie Tillett, go over to FIT, they need a teacher. And I said, what's FIT? I said, I know MIT. My father had graduated from MIT, but I didn't know FIT at all. So he said, you can walk over. So I walked over from 37th Street and Fifth Avenue, and I found myself here, and I was interviewed by Jenny Morse, who founded the textile department. It was called Textile Department then. And they were desperate for a teacher. I think classes were starting like in 24 hours.
Wow.
So they wanted to hire me full-time, and I said, oh, I can't do that. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'll do it part-time and see if I like it. So I did that, and I was still working with Leslie while that was going on. And somebody named Frank Fuller was the administrator who hired me under President Jarvie. And so I started, and in those days, your teaching load, and then the next semester I went to full-time in 1966.
Right.
But I was still working with Leslie, but not full-time. I mean, it was more freelance. And in those days, it was 21 hours was your load of teaching. Today, it's 12 contact hours. And it was mixed between day and evening. And yeah, that's how I started the teaching. And then the next year, Marion Brandis and Mary Jones, Dean of Students and Dean of Academics, asked if I'd like to work with them. while I taught and split my program that way. And I said yes, because I liked something new. And that was quite fascinating. Yeah, that was different. So I was teaching and working with the administration.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your early impressions of the college. At that time, of course, we only had one building, right?
One building, and what is now one of the woven studios was our office that we shared with the people from Textile Science. And so it was across not only departments, but also across schools, divisions they were called then. And the cafeteria was on the 3rd floor. And the escalators really went fast. I think that's my first impression, how fast the escalators went. And they moved people around, and there was a dress code.
Do you remember what it was?
Of course. If you wore pants, it had to be a pantsuit. Mostly it was skirts with pantyhose. I started before the union, because the union didn't come in until 1967. And that was pretty fascinating. It was very different. Very different.
In what way?
A lot of manipulation. There was kind of out of control in certain areas with people's jobs. But the students were great. I liked the students immediately. And there's something about the student body that has remained consistent at FIT, and that is they were here because they want to learn. They want to be here. And so many, and then it was, I don't think we were state then. I think it was just community college. We were kind of a strange animal. And the students, so many of them in our student body are working, and they're earning their own money, and they're doing all kinds of things till late at night and then coming to class in the morning. And that kind of drive and passion to be here has been the consistent thing in all the years I've been here. The student body has changed dramatically, but that's been the consistent common denominator, if you will.
The drive, the ambition, and the...
happy to be here, wanting to be here. Of course, they get disgruntled, when exams come around. That's just normal. But, yeah. So that's something that's remained constant, which I admire. I admire these students. They're not spoiled, and if they come in being spoiled, they get over it very quickly, because we have a very demanding set of programs in this college.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing the 60s and the beehive hairdos and the gloves. And I've seen pictures of people smoking in classrooms.
I did.
Oh.
There you go. I was one of them. Yep. And I've forgotten about that, actually. And many of the students had patent leather mascara. I was fascinated.
What is that? I don't even know what it is.
It's, who knows? But they had these shiny eyelashes that would go up and down. And
it can't be good for you.
No, I doubt that it's still on the market. And yeah, the 60s were one thing, and then came the 70s. That was, one of the things working with the administrators, and they were wonderful women, one of the things I had to do working for Mary Jones was to go into a classroom to get students to come down to her office, and their parents would be there to tell them that, or family, that they had lost somebody in the Vietnam War. Oh. And that was one of the most heartbreaking things I think I've ever done. It was a learning curve for me that I didn't expect. A really valuable lesson of life and its precious fragility, if you will. Yeah.
So you had a very unusual view, because you were both, in the classroom, but you also had administrative point of view as well.
Yep.
So what was that like? How did those two roles interact?
Well, I got to see how it was orchestrated, and how the organization and the levels, which was so, and in the classroom it was so different. We were very much in the classroom, we were very much under the chairman's thumb, Jenny Morse, and she she would, at the end of the semester, she would look at every piece of work. We would have these workshops where everything was looked at and discussed, and it was very different. But seeing the students and then working with the administration and seeing the paperwork and what's going on kind of behind the scenes, it was an eye-opener. It was, I felt I was lucky to see it early on, which certainly did help me later.
What do you mean?
Well, when I ended up getting a presidential appointment as an acting dean, I said, oh, I think I can do that.
What do these mysterious deans do? What is that role like?
Not mysterious to me at all. It's just, I mean, art and design is huge. It's 17 departments. And there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of curriculum. I love writing curriculum. I've written a lot, and programs. So there's a lot of overseeing of that, and working with different departments was terribly interesting to me because I didn't know much about them. And there were people who were very good in what they did and very organized and very kind of strict about their curriculum, and other people are very laissez-faire. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's life. People,
yeah, sure.
And meeting every week, and then there'd be disasters, and and then going to President's Cabinet and watching Marvin Feldman work was kind of like theater.
Yeah.
It was kind of fabulous.
He was a colorful character.
He had a passion for this school, that a real drive and passion. And he would roam the halls, and he would come in and out of classrooms, and he loved the students. And his philosophy was pyramid, small at the top, big faculty, which has now gone this way. In being here that long, you've really seen it change and move. Yeah. But being a dean isn't mysterious at all. It's just
only to outsiders, I think.
There's a lot of signing of papers and a lot of, I think, rubber stamping, because how can you read everything? Signing off on tenure, signing off, there are some parts of it that I think are very serious. Yeah.
People often tell the story of Feldman arriving on his motorcycle.
Yeah, he would. Yeah. And then they'd have parties in their home in New Jersey, and the fridge said, designed by the Feldmans. And he was a character, and but he loved this place. And it filtered through. Even if you didn't agree with him on something, and very often we didn't, but yeah.
So you had said that the real consistency is this drive that the students have for being here, and that's remained the same, you said, over many years.
Yes.
But what's changed? How do you feel that, we'll start with the students, how do you think the students have changed over time?
Well, I think they've changed per decade, and also per economic, whatever is going on, be it, the ups and downs certainly, make a difference. I think political climate has a big impact on a student body, because it, I'll say this carefully, it kind of manages, like we're seeing now, all about tweets and what you get away with on TV and how you can name call. And then there are times when we've had presidents that have been impeached. We've had all kinds of things in 54 years, a lot of drama, and that impacts a group. And the student body is a group. I mean, of course, there's the trends and the styles, and fashion, but that's just the obvious. But music, going from, well, they weren't really into jazz, but going from musical music into hip hop and then to rap, and all that impacts on the student body.
Yeah, so they're now much more into different kinds of culture, and that's affected their
the way they behave and the way they think. The digital age has unfortunately taken away their eye contact ability.
Interesting.
And I think their concentration is very different. They want speed, they want moving image, they're impatient, and they don't know it. And they just think if they push a button, it's going to happen for them. Even on the CAD classes, we still have to work and manipulate and do things. Manners change, all kinds of things. You know, it depends where we are. It depends. Yeah.
I mean, textile surface design, of course, would have to change, right? Because when we were probably already doing CAD even in the 60s, right? Or would that come later?
I was the first one who started CAD in the college.
Okay.
And
I'm just going to say for the film, CAD is computer-aided design.
right. It was the 80s. And we integrated digital design with traditional design, and we taught the first CAD classes. And at that time, I was chairman, and we used the C building lobby little room, which is now the coffee shop. And we had 8 85 kilobyte floppy disks on our standalone computer that was the size of an SUV.
Wow.
I mean, imagine. But we started it. And it's here to stay.
Wow. I wish we had a photograph of that. I would love to see that.
I probably do somewhere if I dig.
If I could ever find me that, I'd love to see
That
it.
would be, yeah.
So tell me, what was it like to do that? What was it like to bring that technology into this space? And obviously it's changed enormously.
Oh, it's changed enormously. Well, going back to the 70s, that's when we had Quonset huts across the street on 27th Street, where Negro Hall now is, because there wasn't enough classroom space, and they were beginning to expand and build. So we had these Quonset huts out there. My students today don't know what a Quonset hut is. And there was a lot of change and movement. We used to have graduation, for instance, behind the C building outdoors.
Yeah.
And then it moved from there when the D building was built behind the Katie Murphy to what was called Alumni Garden, I think, or Alumni something terrace. And yeah, I mean, so it's also just grown enormously in numbers.
A Quonset hut is not like a trailer. What is it actually? It was an actual hut?
It's a round metal structure, not round but oval, kind of like a tennis bubble.
Oh, okay. And we had classes in those?
Yes, we did.
Oh my gosh. That I'd never heard.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Across the street, and they would get hot and they would get cold. There were a lot of space heaters and fans, and yeah, it wasn't ideal, but there was just no room. I mean, we were really no room. And they were building the B building and moving people around, and yeah. And then in the 80s, we branched out, and I wrote most of the BFA program for textile surface design. And we got that accredited at SUNY, and then later on fabric styling, I wrote that. And at the same time we were busy over in Polimoda in Florence, and I wrote a lot of that curriculum. I love writing curriculum. And I would go over there, as I said to you before, I'd meet Alan Fishman, Shirley Goodman's son, and Georgiana Appignani would be around. And then later, when Jean Ellen Giblin was academic vice president, she and I would go together, and I would go to Prada and do all the textile writing and overseeing, and yeah.
You said the Prada? Prado. The Prado, okay.
Prado.
So, just out of curiosity, you said you love writing curriculum. So a lot of people dread it. So what is it about it that you, just out of curiosity, that you like?
Oh, inventing new projects and using new materials and finding new ways and finding ways to combine things and take it to the next level. You know, just not on paper, but let's, move on to leather and linoleum and whatever we can get our hands on. Surface designers. Anything we can touch that we don't destroy. That's, because we do dishes, we do glasses, we do ceilings, floors, anything.
So did you get to go to Italy too?
Oh, back and forth.
Teach there?
Yeah, I didn't teach, just to oversee curriculum and to meet with professors and to see students and to take surveys and
find out how the programs were working, how to integrate them into Europe, and
what was going well, what wasn't, what needed tweaking, that kind of kind of administratively tightening it up. Yeah.
And meanwhile, the industry was obviously going through lots of changes as well.
Oh yes. Yeah. I mean, the whole migration offshore for this industry has been huge. And everything, leaving the South and leaving New York, and it's a different place. There's still flowers on 28th Street. That's really consistent, but not much else that used to be here. At some point, probably in the 60s, I walked into an umbrella, not really factory, but a office on like 39th Street where they made umbrellas, and I had an idea for an umbrella, and I walked in and just touched on the door, and I said, I have a design idea, would you like to look at it? And they said, sure, and then they printed it. And it was a Tiffany umbrella with all engineered with a loop and stuff, because I thought, why not? So you could do that in those days. You could open the yellow pages. Today it's different, and we did research. The research, that's a huge change now. Everybody thinks it's on Google or Pinterest.
But what would you have done then? That would be, how would you have done research then?
Books.
So you came here to the library?
Yes, but actually my husband had the first retail store ever in Soho, and it was an art bookstore, art, architecture, and photography. It was called Yop Rietman, and it was very famous and went on for years, and it was kind of a salon where everybody would meet on weekends. Many people here would hang out there. I mean, it was just a mecca for me, and he built me one of the most complete textile libraries, I think, maybe on the Eastern Seaboard, if not the country.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. It's all double shelved in the apartment and in 2 rooms. Yeah, it's enormous.
Wow, what a resource.
Yes.
And it still exists.
That's mine. We sold a lot of books. He closed the store, and then he recently passed away, so my son and I sold a lot of books that he had saved in a warehouse that we double, like Bryce Martin, and read a lot of double things, but the good stuff is still. And that led me to be able to really enjoy and really research as an expert witness for copyright infringement and trade dress and copyright, all that. Yeah.
So you got to go into the legal side of textiles
Yes.
as well.
For the last 25 or 30 years.
So for a young person who is just used to looking at everything on their phone, how is it different to look at books and do that kind of research than to simply Google something? What's the, I'm not going to say that one is an advantage, although maybe you feel that it is, but what is the benefit of looking through books and so forth as opposed to Googling?
You have a much more comparative with books. You can open up 2 or 3 books and lay them next to each other. And otherwise you're scrolling, unless you're printing out all the time. And then the printouts aren't that successful, and the color is always off. And unless you mix color with paint, you're not going to get it on any screen or monitor, in my estimation. I think books, they're magical. For me, they're magical. And in my classes, we use CAD and we scroll around, but they have to have printed images. If you're doing a layout, you just can't do it by scrolling or seeing something this big when you're working this big.
And what is the, I mean, obviously, as you pointed out, the industry moved offshore. But what else in terms of pattern design, surface design, has that changed?
It changes readily. Yeah, I mean, it depends who's the artist of the week, if you will. And I mean, right now, where Basquiat is getting so much press, I think we're going to see a lot of that coming up. Basquiat, I can't think of his first name.
Not Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Yeah.
Oh,
Basquiat,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm probably mispronouncing it, yeah. And now, I mean, if you look back in the 70s and you saw the graffiti that, New York lived under, and Soho was so dark and murky and I thought fabulous until it got regentrified. And, but I think that we're going to see a lot of images coming out of his works.
Oh.
And I think it's going to be kind of a resurgence of what was once graffiti, if you will. Yeah. And so it's that kind of thing that, or if there's some fabulous show at the Met, it's going to influence, or at Washington, it's theater, music.
I love the story about the umbrella, but now if you wanted to do something like that, would you have to send it overseas and scan something and do it that way, or?
And those little places don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the yellow pages. I found all kinds of things in the yellow pages. I did all kinds of crazy things, freelance projects like that. And it's just different. It's all different. And I guess in my lifetime, the biggest difference is 9/11. And it still has an impact. It always will.
How did that affect textiles, do you think?
Well, I was in a classroom when it happened.
Right.
And I was with students, and that was the beginning. And I don't think it's even just textiles. I think it's everything. Everything is, George Orwell was right. There are cameras everywhere. Alexa's listening to us. It's different. The freedom is gone. Different kinds of constraints.
On surface design too, do you think?
No, not particularly on surface design, but on the people who are designing the surface design. Therefore, I think it does come out. If you understand
Yes,
the way
I
I'm
do.
going on that, kind of like a maze. But before it was more, splash and dash, and this will work, and I just have to do that. But now it's not, and also because of the computer, it's everything is kind of in a box.
Some I've heard designers talk about how corporate structure has also changed a lot, and that's also meant that everything has to get signed off on at different levels and so on and so forth. I don't know if that's true also in
Yes, in text it is. Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yes, I have a lot of graduates that I'm still in touch with who work, for instance, at Kravet or at Lee Joffe or at Robert Allen, which has now just gone Chapter 11. There's so many Chapter 11s happening, and CHF, and before we'd design it and we'd work with somebody, but now there are project managers, and then there's the other person who looks at the project managers, what they've done, and it's just levels and levels and levels. It's just red tape. It's just different. I mean, I don't know what year it was. It was in the 60s with Leslie, and he called me up and he said, I need you to go down to Broadway and bring black paint and a paintbrush, because there's a play that's going to be produced, and I need you to do the fabrics for it. And I said, okay. So I went down, and it was Sweet Charity. Couldn't do that today. You couldn't get in. You couldn't get in. I couldn't get in here, and I work here for 54 years. I couldn't get in. It's different. It's just, there's something about it that's just different.
Yeah. So did the Sweet Charity thing, did your Did they use the fabrics on Broadway? And
Yes, Gwen Verdon was a character,
Sure.
and she got really, it was all black and white, and she got really bored, and so she just stripped, and she said, go with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth, she said, come on, honey, just paint on me. I was all of 20-something.
Wow.
Oh, okay,
Do you have a picture of that? I'd love to see that too.
I do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sure, I have all kinds of, portfolios and storage. I mean, I've been at this a long time.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. But that was one of those remarkable things. So that's what I love. And even today for these students, and I tell them, the diversity in this field of textile surface design, because it's surface, there are places for them to go. They don't just have to sit and do a textile. They can do stationery. There's all kinds of paper products. Yeah. That was another big project I did with the Procter & Gamble. And the first printed disposable diapers in the world.
Wow.
And I'd go out there, and then it was during the time of everybody was the same. There was no gender differentiation. And I said, it's time for boys and girl babies. And so I did blue for the boys, and I did pink for the girls. And little rosebuds, we printed the outer sheets, and then blue pinstripe for the boys, very conservative, but boy. And I licensed with Children Television Workshop, TGW, and I got the Muppets, the baby Muppets, and they're still for the waistband, and it's, yeah. And then I did their paper towels, and then I did their toilet tissue. Again, I brought that into my kitchen, and I embossed it with everything. I think the kitchen is the best studio an artist can have. Every tool you need is in there.
Gosh. This was in the 60s or 70s?
70s. Might have been 70s, 80s. I don't know. I'd have to.
That's okay.
But it's in there somewhere, but my dates are.
Understandable. You had mentioned actually.
But I was teaching here at the time.
Oh,
I mean,
you
I
were
was.
teaching.
Yeah, I was teaching here, and so it was later, and I might have even been acting dean at the time. I think I was. I was doing a lot.
Sounds like you had a busy time. These are all amazing projects.
I'm in the midst of one now that's hoping to get a patent on, and we'll see.
This is the baby slip?
No, this is something totally different in sportswear. It's sports gear, actually, not sportswear, sports gear.
Oh.
So I have a pending patent.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
No, I don't talk about it much.
And
It's
now
out
we
there.
know.
Now you know.
Well, we should follow up on that actually afterward, if that's okay. Discuss.
When I get it, I'll let you know.
Okay.
If I get it.
You actually mentioned alumni of the program, and alumni from your department have reached top positions in the field. And I was wondering if you would mind talking a little bit about some of them, some of your favorites, or people that you...
They're all my favorites. I mean, I really, each one in a different way. I mean that each one they bring something, and I learn from them, which is why I've stayed here. It's because of the students. One young lady, she was in my one-year program a couple of years ago, and she really wanted passionately to work for Lilly Pulitzer. And now she is.
Wow.
And she moved to Philadelphia. She stayed with an internship at Lee Joffa, and she said, I really need a job. I said, then go up to Madison Avenue and work in Lilly Pulitzer on the weekends. And, and now she's designing for them. So that's kind of like a Cinderella story. That's nice. Yeah. And then the ones at Kravitt and at Lee Joffa and at CH are the ones I've mentioned, and they all have good jobs. They're designers, and they're one was the head of the woven department at Lee Joffa, and so and then some are still working their way up, and some CAD designers, and yeah.
You must have had many moments where you walked past a product or products in a store and went, I know the person who designed that. I know that.
Not really.
No, really?
No, that's not. It's
not that.
We're not the fashion designer.
Okay.
We do your plaid. We don't do the shirt.
Right.
Yeah, I recently just saw one of my old designs in Veranda magazine that's resurfaced. So that kind of thing is, that I can recognize and see. But the students keep in touch and they send me, what they're doing. And if they've done something and they send it to me, like one girl 2 years ago in the home products class that I teach the juniors, the whole junior 2 semesters. And one of their projects is the bathroom and accessories. And then she got an internship, and she did 3 designs, and they were produced. And she was so thrilled, and she wrote to me, and she thanked me, and I've got pictures of it upstairs in my classroom for the students to be inspired by.
That's great.
So if they tell me, but otherwise I'm not going to,
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay. But I was going to say, what do you think, we can come back to more alums if you think of others later that you wanted to mention, but what do you think the overall influence of the textile?
Right, let me just, the alums, okay.
Sure.
Part of it that I hadn't thought about before. How many are teaching with me now? So, one of the first people to teach the CAD has now been at the college for 30 years.
Wow.
Many of them, maybe 6, are in my department.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So they were students, and now they're friends and colleagues, and yes, and I'm very proud of that.
That's great.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, what do you think the overall influence of the textile surface design department and fabric styling have been on the industry as what if the industry is more X or more Y, maybe because of the work that FIT.
I hope so. Let me say that. I certainly hope so, and I think we have to make an impact because they're out there working, and then they come back to us and they serve on our advisory board, and they come back and do critiques of the classwork, and I think.
Could we quantify what that influence has been? Is there a quality that our grads bring into the workplace that's distinctive in some way?
Well, they bring their work ethic, and they're talented. They come in here and they're talented, and when I'm teaching them, my goal is to try to bring them out so that they can show their artistry. And I think that's something that they do bring. They're not robots. Yeah. And they've got a skill set that's very defined, the combination of the traditional and the digital. And it works really well for them, and got good jobs out there.
Good.
Yeah.
Of course, that's major. I don't know if you'd mind talking a little bit about you had mentioned some of the people that you've known, Marvin Feldman, excuse me. Are there other figures from the college that you have fond memories of?
Oh, many. Oh, wow. Gladys Marcus.
What was she like?
She was wonderful. She was one of the nicest individuals I've ever met. She was really special. Smart, kind, and fearless. Yeah, she was great. So many.
What was Shirley Goodman like? I've heard so many different stories.
I never worked with her.
Okay.
But I worked around her, or she was there, and she'd come into our meetings and sit, and she was just interesting. She loved this place too. She was very passionate about FIT, and I knew her son much better because we were more contemporaries and worked together.
Right.
He came out of the fine arts department. Elaine Stone, she was, great. So many. Pete Scotese. and he was acting president after Marvin, and he was the second person to appoint me a dean. And, I don't know, a lot of ghosts out there. George Levinson.
I don't know that one.
He was one of the founders of the union. Wonderful man, yeah.
Many.
I mean, if I look through a yearbook and I go, oh. Yeah.
Can you pause for 1 second?
Oh,
Should you change the battery?
On me? My battery?
On the camera. You're doing great.
Yeah?
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I
Oh, okay.
I don't know. It's weird from memory, it's like,
You're doing great.
Yeah.
thank you.
Oh, seriously, Susan, if you have a picture of that old computer in the C building.
I'd have to go way
Oh.
back and find it, but that would be fun to
That would be
have.
hard, but,
Yeah.
it's our 75th anniversary this year, 1920, this academic year, 2019-2020. So something like that would be really fun.
To have. I can also ask around. I can ask Ellen. She might even have one.
Ellen.
Oster.
I'm gonna tell James that he can come in too. Okay, super, thank you. Otherwise, I was like, I'm gonna do something.
Oh, we're ready. Okay. So we're in the last part of it, but if I've missed something or if there's other stuff you'd like to talk about, we'll come back to that at the end. Are you ready to? So you won a SUNY Chancellors Award for in academic year 2015-2016 for excellence in faculty service.
I did.
So can you tell me about that? What was the award? What happened?
I had to redo my resume. And I guess I've done a lot through this college that really impacted on faculty and on programs and curriculum and yeah.
Great.
I got nominated and so I submitted things and you collect letters and
There you go.
I don't know what to say about it.
That's
I was
okay.
very pleased to get it. It was an honor. And yeah. And I didn't go for it. And people said, why didn't you go for excellence in teaching? I said, because I have that. I have that in so many letters and plaques and certificates and things that I've gotten that I said, this is different. This is... And I've had so many positions in the college where I've been chairman and dean and head of the Senate, and I mean, so I've done a lot. And this was sort of more of a challenge and different.
Okay. So, what person do you think had the most positive influence on your life?
Let's say my father and my husband. My father for his integrity and his honesty and strength, and my husband for his compassion and being behind me and saying you can do it. Yeah.
When did you marry? You were married in the...
It was second marriage
Oh.
to Yop, and that was in the 70s.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a specific book that you think influenced you the most?
Yes.
Will
The
you-
Lorax by
The
Dr.
Lorax.
Zeus. Absolutely. And I think that's what led me to lead the SOS project. In the 90s was declared the decade of the Earth. And so I did the first sustainable project in the college.
What was that?
It was called SOS Save Our Surface. And I I was chairman at the time, so I just took it upon myself to be bossy. And I went to every classroom and I assigned a project that fit into their course of study and, wasn't going off the curriculum. But in other words, it would either be aquatic or fauna or flora, and it had to have some resonance with sustainability. I was kind of sick of one more pretty flower. Let's make a difference. And we had the first ever faculty and student show in the museum, and we sold the work, and to World Wildlife got a percentage of the proceeds. For years, Loretta Keene had some of the student paintings in her office upstairs, and different people in the college and many people from outside came, and it was all videotaped. We were on MTV, we made garments, we were all over the People magazine. It's, afterwards you can look at the pictures in here if you want to see them. It was a big undertaking, and the department just rallied, and they were great, and we did it together, and we made t-shirts which we sold in the Barnes & Noble bookstore here and across the country. And they all said SOS, Save Our Surface. And then after a while, people were starting to call it Save Our Susan, because it kind of got out of hand. But we reined it in, and I'm very proud of that. That was because it involved everybody, and it was very successful. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was big.
I love that. What would you like for people to remember about you?
I don't know. I hope that I'm fair. Sense of humor. Fairness is probably the biggest thing. But I think that's, I don't know, I'll probably think of something else, but.
That's okay. And is there, what question or questions did I not ask that you wish I had asked you?
No, not really. But maybe what was my favorite art movement?
What was it?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination, but Russian constructivism. With its simplicity and its balance and its use and understanding of negative space because of all they went through. And then parallel to that is Northwest Pacific Coast Indian.
Wow.
Again, because of their simplicity and their message. It's the messages.
Is constructivism, is that Alexander Rodchenko? Is he one of them?
Yeah, and Kandinsky and Lissitzky and Malevich. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I just think of where people understood what they were going through, and those who could really express it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
My favorite music is Brazilian.
Oh, Brazilian.
Yes.
What style is that?
Oh, like Jobim, and it's just fabulous. My favorite food as well. Brazilian, yeah. It was a place we traveled to many, many times. And, yeah, it's very soothing. Personal things. I don't know. And the other thing that you wouldn't know about, so you couldn't possibly ask about, but people who know me know here at school, and then people who know me outside of school, is that I have a very massive frog collection.
A frog collection?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yes. The frog collection here in my office has grown over the years, and every frog in there has been given to me by students, staff, or faculty. And people walk by and they say, "Is this a shop?" You'll have to visit. You won't. It's kind of overwhelming to people. And now some of the items have become valuable because they're like from occupied Japan, like salt and pepper cellars and things from 40 years ago. And at home, it's a very, it's a prestigious, important collection where we have Fabergé frogs and we have a Berber necklace of 5 generations with frogs on it. And the oldest piece is from 4000 BC, and it's a lapis lazuli, little small Egyptian amulet.
Wow, 4000 BC.
Yeah.
Whoa.
There are 7 frog cases in the apartment, one giant one that would cover this whole wall that was specially built for us, and then a collection of frog jewelry that is remarkable, including David Webb and Angela Cummings and Trifari. And
Have you chosen the museum which is going to receive this collection, or is it to go to your
no, but
descendants?
I've told my grandchildren that they're in charge. Yeah, it's massive, and it's fabulous. It's really fabulous, and it all started because my husband was the Frog Prince, and that was the name of my company, Frog Prince, Prints. So it all started from that.
When was this? When was that?
70s. Well, it started in the 70s, and then it's kind of dwindled now because I'm not doing that much out of it. I'm doing other things. Besides the expert witnessing, I'm also involved in I'm doing a visual presentation book of an ex-CIA operative. And I've done part 1, and it's been presented, and now part 2 is the second part. And he's somebody who's been for 18 years in kidnap for ransom negotiations. So it's quite fascinating. So you've gathered now from talking to me that I like different things.
Eclectic.
Very, yeah.
Tell me more. I don't understand. So it's a book of things that
His first career was journalism.
Okay.
And he gave me all his archives. And so I did this book. Big. It's a visual presentation book. It's not a scrapbook. It's something with original pieces in it. And then after that, we digitized it. But it's the original. And now the second part is his biography.
Oh.
From being a journalism to being in the CIA to now this negotiator. And it's fascinating.
Wow, it sounds fascinating.
He's fascinating. And there are some things that we can't even talk about, that we can't put in, but you just write down undisclosed area or person or something. And yeah, I have it's all photographed. I mean, the second part's underway. I hope to finish it by June, but it's a massive undertaking.
Oh,
but it's
amazing.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So.
Wow.
Fun to be busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay. Are we good? I think we're good. Thank you so much, Susan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.